This video isn't necessarily about Hawaii, but I know it'll help out a lot of local guys and local girls. It's about the K1 visa process, or the 90-day fiancé process, and what it was like for me, a local guy, marrying a Japanese girl from Japan. And it's gonna be our process and our timeline. I'm gonna go over our little 90-day fiancé experience, although our experiences were definitely less dramatic than what you see on TV. So I'm gonna talk about what we did, our timeline, and maybe some tips for the K1 visa application all the way through to the green card. So this video is probably gonna be pretty long, but I'm assuming if you're watching it, you're trying to get it right, and I hope that by sharing my experience, it'll be helpful, that maybe you have someone to kind of share their process and what they went through. Of course, this applies to anyone in the US trying to bring someone over from Japan, as well as to a much lesser extent, anyone bringing anyone else from a different country to the United States through this process. In Hawaii, this is a pretty common process because a lot of people do marry people outside the United States. We're so close to Asia. So I'm hoping that our experiences will be somewhat helpful, maybe bring some relief or some comfort or some encouragement to anybody else who's trying to go through this process. So just some disclaimers. First of all, I am not an attorney, although I do work with a lot of attorneys. But if you need an immigration attorney, I would recommend getting one. It's a pretty tough process, but definitely manageable. If you can kind of read through the paperwork, I think you can do it yourself. For us, our situation was fairly straightforward. We didn't have kids, we didn't have prior marriages, so that made it a little easier, although it was still challenging. The second point is that this is an experience from 2018 to 2019. So it could change depending on the administration. It could change on a lot of things. So in the future, it might be a shorter process. It could be longer. I don't know your particular situation. I don't know when you're watching this video, but this is for 2018 to 2019. And the third thing is, I'm assuming that if you found this video and that you are looking at this video as somewhat helpful, that you've done some homework on your own. So you understand at least the general outline of the process. So I'm not gonna go over every little thing. I'm just gonna go over some of the major things that happened. And so if you need any more assistance, there's lots of stuff online, including the USCIS website. So prior to submitting the K1 visa application, so the proposal was in December 2017, and that was before the application. So we already knew going into the application that we were going to get married. We booked a hotel, we had our ceremony set up, we're pretty much good to go. Originally, we booked the hotel for September of 2018, but I'm glad that we didn't, because we wouldn't have made that timeline. So we actually moved the date to December 2018, which was still pretty close, but we made it. So it wasn't really like the show 90 Day Fiancé, where I think they're still trying to figure out if they're gonna get married. We already knew we were gonna get married, and then the application was just the next step. So it's at that point in December that I started gathering the paperwork that we would be needed. There's a lot of documents that have to go with the application, so I was putting those together slowly. In terms of the wedding planning, I think this is something that a lot of people are confused about, they're concerned about. You're going through this process, the timeline is pretty tight, it's very uncertain. How do you plan for a wedding? So for us, what we did was we planned for that wedding, and we planned it for December. I estimated that the timeline to get the visa would take roughly 6 to 8 months, which is not true. That wasn't our situation, but I didn't know. So we had planned the wedding for December, and it was very stressful. We thought about eloping and then just doing the ceremony later, like taking our time, have her come here, and then she could help plan the wedding, be a part of it, be more hands-on, and then just do the wedding ceremony and reception later on once she was here. But we decided not to do that. So we took a chance, and we're just really thankful and grateful that things worked out. We also thought about getting married in Japan and then doing the spouse visa. That way, at least we're married, and then we would just do the process that way. But again, we decided not to do that. We wanted to get married in Hawaii, and so that's what we went with. I will say that it will be extremely stressful trying to plan a wedding. If you're in Hawaii and she's in Japan, or he's in Japan, and you're trying to get married here, it's gonna be pretty tough. You know, Hawaii weddings, they tend to be big, they tend to be expensive. So by not having someone here to kind of help you, especially if you're the guy, it's gonna be tough. So just a heads up, it wasn't easy. I'm glad that I had family to help me, because without them, I don't think I could have done the application process as well as the wedding planning. Okay, so now submitting the K-1 visa application. So we submitted the application at the end of December of 2017, and I received an email notification that they received it in early January. And that doesn't really mean much, because for us, our application had to actually be forwarded to the California Processing Center. It was at least nice that we got a notification, so that, you know, ease of mind, but I already knew that we'd have to wait a very long time. So some general tips for the application, and these aren't in any particular order, but the first thing is make sure that you have everything that you need in the application. I created a checklist, and I'm gonna post it on here for you. You can just kind of give a general checklist of what I made sure that I included. It included payment, it included the form, the passport style photos for both me and my wife, a birth certificate, letters certifying intent to marry, proof that we've met in person for the past 2 years, and proof of an ongoing relationship. It's a lot of stuff to put together. I'm gonna try to break down at least some of it for you, but it was a lot of stuff. You wanna make sure that you have everything, because you don't want to get one of the requests for evidence forms back to you and you'd be like, oh, I gotta do that, or I forgot that. It just delays everything. Make sure you got everything right the first time. Another tip is I'd also consider including a cover letter. It not only made it easier for me to make sure I have everything included, but it made it easier, I'm sure, for the USCIS person who receives this packet to see where everything is. So I would recommend including a cover letter. It really just helps on organization and just makes it easier for that person. Another tip is make sure to label things. And so on every form, I put a little post-it note that just wrote what it was. And of course, it was in the order of my cover letter. It makes everything organized. It made everything easier for me. So as I'm sort of double checking, triple checking, making sure everything is there, I know exactly what's there because I wrote it on a post-it note. And the last thing is proof of the ongoing relationship. You're gonna wanna make sure that you over document, if anything. I think that's what we did. We had so many photos, we had a lot of emails, we had copies of text messages, letters. I even included the engagement ring receipt just to make sure, just to prove to them that this was legitimate, that this was actually real. Because again, you don't want them to send an REF to you to say, hey, we need more proof. I think you just want to make it easy for them to just pass it along. So things like dating your photos on the back, who's in the photo, where the photo actually is, I think is very important. So they can kind of keep a general timeline. And so for months, we heard absolutely nothing, like nothing. And we checked the app, we checked online, no update to our case, which you're probably gonna be very angsty after a while. So we just tried to do other things. We tried to be distracted with the wedding and just general life, but it's gonna be like a long wait of nothing. But we did hear back and our case was approved in mid-July. So again, from the time we submitted our application, January, mid-July, the case was approved. But that doesn't mean that it's over, right? That's the big hurdle, but it's not over. It's sort of just getting started. So then we got the NOA-2 in the mail, and our case was forwarded from the National Visa Center to the embassy in Japan, roughly in mid to late August. So it was about a month between the time that our case got approved to the time the Japanese embassy, or the US embassy in Japan, received our application. And let me just say, for this part, the waiting part, general tips, there's the visa forum, which is online, which is a great resource, but I'd recommend staying away from checking the forum every single hour or every single day, because it becomes obsessive, right? Where you keep checking it, you keep refreshing it to see what's going on, and you got all these people who are going through the same process. It's encouraging, but at the same time, if you let it kind of control your life, it's just gonna stress you out. So try to limit you checking. It doesn't really help. It doesn't speed up the process for you. You just have to do a good job on the application and just be patient. All right, so now US Embassy in Japan and that whole situation over there. It's a lot easier for my wife to talk about that, but for me, I'm just gonna share kind of generally what happened. And for us, actually, there was a little extra complication because of the background check that you needed. So for most people, they just live in the same country. You just need the background check from that particular country. But for my wife, because she lived in a different place, we had to go out and get the criminal background check from that other country and then the one from Japan. And so that became a little more complicated for us, and it definitely delayed us by at least 3 to 4 weeks. So during this sort of downtime, I also made sure to send her a copy of the K-1 visa application that I submitted just so she could have that with her, as well as my financial information. So I had to get bank statements, I had to get a letter from my employer, just to kind of prove, because it's gonna help her out on her end when she has to submit her form. So make sure that you get these, make sure that you have sufficient funds, make sure that your job, hopefully can earn enough so that you can support your spouse coming to the United States. But those are all things that I had to make sure that I had and that were in order. So she submitted her online non-immigrant visa application in mid to late September, and then from there she could see when the available interview times were available. Her medical exam was scheduled for early October, and her interview at the US Embassy in Japan was scheduled for late October. So once that was over, it was pretty smooth sailing. So now coming to Hawaii, and I think they say you have roughly 6 months to come to the US after it's been approved. I don't know exactly what the timeline was, but she came in a lot sooner. Because you have to remember, our wedding was set for early December, and so if she waited 6 months, it would have been way past our wedding. So we made sure to bring her over in mid-November, which, if you think about it, is pretty tight considering the wedding would be in about 3 weeks. Not much time for wedding prep and planning and just getting adjusted to life here in Hawaii. So if you're getting married in Hawaii, you want to make sure you get the marriage license. So that's what we did a couple days after she arrived. We went over to the Department of Health, got our paperwork, we're all set. And we ended up getting married in early December. It went as smooth as it could possibly go, all things considered. I was pretty pleased with how it went. A lot of guests, a lot of people, a lot of family, a lot of fun. But just glad that we were over this whole process that started all the way in January. But after that, it's not over yet. We had to go and get copies of the marriage certificate. And so in about mid-December, we went down and I got copies, about 10 copies, just to make sure. They also send you one through the mail, but I'm not sure if it's official. Again, that's just locally here in Hawaii. They send you a copy, but I'm not sure if it's official because it's not on that green paper. I ended up just going down there and getting more copies. By the end of December, we got her a social security card, and that was important because of insurance and to establish a bank account. So those are just things that I want to make sure that that was set up for her. And so that's when we decided to do it. Maybe you could do it earlier, I'm not exactly sure, but that's what we did. We got it at the end of December because, again, insurance and the bank account. So moving on to the green card process, whole separate thing, right? We submitted our green card application at the end of January, and we received notification that they received it beginning of February. And again, it was just sitting and waiting. We basically kind of forgot about the whole process for the green card after we submitted, because we have no idea how long it was, we had no idea how long it was going to take. It could have taken a few months, could have taken several months. Some people have been waiting years for it. And I think there's less urgency because she's finally here in the country and it's just a matter of time. So we definitely were a little more relaxed on this process, not compared to the visa application, but eventually things ended up happening. In mid-May, we received the approval that our green card application was all good to go. Of course, we still have the interview, but mid-May, that's not bad. So in mid-June, we received an online update that our interview was going to be scheduled. For some reason, they don't tell you exactly at that moment when it's going to be scheduled. They just tell you, oh, we scheduled your interview. We'll let you know when that date's going to be. So just a heads up, you have to be flexible. So about a week later in July, we received the letter that said, hey, your interview is scheduled for a particular date, and ours was about mid to late August was when our interview would be scheduled. So again, going back, we submitted the application in late January. Our interview was mid to late August. I was a little nervous at the interview, mostly because it's videotaped, it's recorded, there's a camera on you, and then you have to swear in, and it's kind of hard to get grilled and questioned about your relationship where you know it's a high pressure situation. I will give the agent a lot of credit who interviewed us. She was very nice, and it was easier over time, but some of the questions that were asked, you just kind of like, you know, you get kind of nervous. So I would say if you have time, kind of practice with your partner, kind of talk about what are some things that, you know, what's your routine at home? What are some just general in life things? And if you've been married for any long period of time, you probably know what those things are. But I think, yeah, it helped to kind of go over some of those things before the interview, because you don't want to really look like you're guessing a lot of things, and that doesn't necessarily look so great. Of course, I was pretty confident that we would get the approval, just the way that the interview went, and just I think how the agent kind of warmed up to us, I think. So again, gave her a lot of credit. She was very nice and professional, and I felt like it was just a very professional experience. So we received the approval update the following day. I don't know how long it normally takes people to go through the approval process for green cards, but for us, we got the yes the following day, which was a nice big relief. And then about 1 week later in the mail, we got the green card. So again, green card process, application submitted late January. They received it early February. We got our green card in hand by the end of August. So in closing, it's a long video, I'm sure, but in closing, let me just say it's a very stressful process. I understand why people get attorneys, because you just don't want to deal with it. But if you can do it, I would say do it. I think both people have to be very patient, very understanding. And if there's any mistakes, I would hate for them to be like blaming the other person, arguments over that, because it's just very stressful. I can say as the person in the United States, I did a lot of the work early on with the application, and then later when the case was sent overseas, my wife did a lot of the work there, and then when we're both here for the green card application, we worked on it together. So just know that if you're feeling overwhelmed, like on your side, it does change, it does shift, where it feels like a lot of the responsibility is on one person during one season of this process, you know, and then in another season, it may seem like the other person has a lot of the work, and it's unfair, and it's tiring, and it's so stressful. And so I think that's natural, but I think being patient, understanding, you know, things that you're gonna need in marriage, right? But I just feel like it's a tough process, and it's a long process. It's longer for others. You know, our process, we're very thankful and grateful that it was super smooth. You know, no RFEs, no delays. It was just really smooth. We got everything. And again, we were working against a hard deadline for early December to get married. So it was pretty stressful at times, but I'm just thankful that we made it and that it's done. I can definitely say it is hard to bring someone to the US, especially through this K-1 visa process, green card process. It is difficult. And I guess in some ways, I'm glad it's difficult, because you really want to vet people, want to make sure that they are who they say they are, and that these marriages are legitimate. And this entire process definitely tests your patience. So I would say try to be patient. Try not to look online so much for the timelines of others. Again, this video hopefully will help explain everything in its totality, and it isn't just sort of like these short-term races where you kind of feel like, oh, this person got this way faster than us and we're left behind. But you don't know after what happens to that person in their entire journey, because it might be delayed, it might be complicated, and they may have beaten you to some notification, but you may catch up and pass them. You don't really know all that stuff. So I'm hoping that this video, having done the entire process, will give you at least some general comfort and say, okay, well, that was fast for that that particular notification was really fast for him, but then this part was a lot slower. Oh, okay, it's okay. Or this part was really slow for him, but then he eventually caught up. And again, just putting it all out there with a person who's gone through it. We've gone through it, and I'm just grateful that it's all done. So thanks for watching this video. I hope that it was really helpful for you, whether you're a local boy, local girl, or you're just on the mainland trying to bring someone over. And good luck. It's a long process, but just have to persevere. So thanks for watching, and aloha.